It was the summer before my senior year, and we had just finished our finals. My friend Chris had this big idea to do a last-minute, no-plans road trip down the California coast. No hotels, no reservations, just 5 of us, 1 car, and a week of camping, car sleeping, and dive food. I had never done something that spontaneous, but honestly it felt like the right way to burn off months of stress. It was me, Chris, Maya, Leo, and Sam. None of us had done this exact route before, but we figured we'd stop wherever we felt like it and sleep wherever the car fit. The trip started off great. Long stretches of highway, good playlists, and plenty of dumb gas station snacks. But it was on our 3rd night, somewhere just outside Mendocino, when the energy shifted. We were driving north along a 2-lane stretch with cliffs on one side and thick forest on the other. No lights, no houses, just miles of pitch black, and that eerie silence that starts to build when no one talks for too long. Sam was passed out in the back, and Maya was dozing off with one earbud in. Chris was driving, and I was navigating. His phone had died earlier, and mine was glitching, like freezing on certain screens and then jumping ahead. We figured it was just bad reception, but it was annoying enough that Chris pulled into the next gas station to charge his phone and reset mine. That's where things started getting weird. The station itself felt off from the second we pulled in. It was one of those half-lit places where the bulbs flickered like they were running on fumes. There was a truck parked at the side, rusted and empty, and an old guy sitting behind the register who didn't even glance up when we walked in. The inside smelled like damp wood and gasoline. Chris asked if we could use the restroom, and the guy just motioned with his chin toward a hallway in the back. No words. I stayed by the charging station while Chris went, and as I leaned on the counter, I noticed the security monitor behind the register was showing a feed of the pumps and lot outside. On the screen, I could clearly see our car, but there was something standing just behind it. At first, I thought it was a shadow or a weird angle, but then it moved. Just a shift, like a lean, but enough to tell it was a person. I turned to look out the window, but there was nothing there. When I looked back at the monitor, the figure was gone. I asked the clerk if anyone else had pulled in, but he didn't even blink. Just kept staring past me like he hadn't heard a word. I told myself I imagined it, maybe a leftover smudge or reflection, but when Chris came back, his face was pale. He didn't say much, just that we should leave. I pressed him about the bathroom, but all he said was, it smelled like something had died in there. That was enough for all of us. We got back in the car and continued driving, but after a few minutes, Maya sat up suddenly and asked, "Who's tailing us?" Chris checked the mirror. Headlights were behind us now, dim and uneven, like maybe one was busted. The vehicle kept his distance, but didn't pass us, even though we were going well under the speed limit. We figured it might be someone else who had stopped at the gas station, but none of us remembered seeing another car pull in. Chris sped up a little, but the car stayed behind. We slowed down, and it slowed, too. No matter what we did, it matched us. About 30 minutes later, we reached a fork in the road. The GPS was back and suggested we veer left onto a scenic route. We took it. The road narrowed into a winding lane through thick trees and steep drops, but after a few curves, the headlights behind us disappeared. We all felt this brief shared relief until we realized we hadn't seen any signs or pull-offs for a long while. No lights, no cars, nothing but forest. Then we saw it. On the right side of the road, something had been dragged across the gravel, like claw marks or tire ruts, but erratic, deep and fresh. Chris slowed the car just slightly, and that's when we saw a figure standing just off the road between 2 trees. I don't know how to describe it other than tall, too thin, and wrong. It wasn't moving, just standing. But the longer we stared, the less human it looked. There was no detail to the face, no clothing we could make out, just the outline of something humanoid watching. Sam, now fully awake, whispered from the back, "Why does it look like it's waiting?" That sentence chilled me more than the thing itself. We all agreed not to stop. We kept driving, trying not to talk, trying not to look back, but 20 minutes later, we passed what looked like the exact same spot. Same trees, same clawed-up road, same figure. Maya started crying. Chris cursed and punched the steering wheel. Leo turned off the music, and the silence that followed was unbearable. Eventually, we spotted a roadside turnout and pulled in to regroup. It was a small dirt patch, barely wide enough for the car. Everyone got out except me. I was too freaked out to move. While the others paced or looked at the trees, I opened my phone. I had reception again. A tiny bar, but enough to open the map. The location dot spun in circles for a few seconds before settling on a red pin I didn't recognize. No street name, just a label that said Cold Mouth. That's all it said, just Cold Mouth. I showed it to Chris, and he immediately got back in the car. Everyone followed without needing an explanation. We drove in silence for the next hour, watching the trees grow thinner, until we finally found a small campground with lights, tents, and other people. We didn't talk to anyone. We just parked, locked the doors, and tried to sleep. None of us really slept. Every sound outside made us flinch. Every crunch of gravel, every snap of a twig. In the middle of a night, I looked out the window and saw someone standing at the edge of the tree line. Same height, same build, just watching. I blinked, and they were gone. The next morning, Chris swore he had dreamed of the gas station clerk standing over him with no eyes. We cut the road trip short after that, drove home straight with barely a word exchanged. But the weirdest part, a week later, Maya was scrolling through her photos and noticed something. In one of the pictures we took at a beach the day before the gas station stop, there's someone in the background, off in the distance, at the tree line. Same build, same outline, same stance, as if it had been following us before we ever noticed it. We never figured out what cold mouth meant, or if the gas station was even real, but I haven't been on a road trip since, and I never will again. Not after what followed us. Not after what still might be.
My name's Jason, and this happened back in the summer of 2011. I had just finished my second year of college and was spending the break with two of my closest friends, Drew and Mikey. We'd known each other since middle school and had been planning this road trip since high school. The plan was to drive from Northern California to Colorado and hit a bunch of national parks along the way. Just a long-needed guys trip, cheap motels, campgrounds, no real schedule, just the open road. We were all excited to get away from everything, but looking back now, I wish we'd just stayed home. By day 3, we were somewhere in central Utah, out in the kind of terrain where the sky feels way too big and the land stretches out forever. We had veered off the interstate to take a scenic route that Google Maps claimed would shave off an hour. It started as a normal 2-lane road, but as the sun dipped behind the cliffs, it narrowed into a crumbling strip of pavement with no guardrails and barely any signs. We hadn't passed another car in over an hour. That's when we saw him. He was standing at the side of the road near a bent mile marker, wearing a dirty tan coat that looked too heavy for the weather. We slowed instinctively. He was holding his thumb out, but as we passed, we noticed something that made our stomachs knot. His face, or rather the lack of one. It was dark, and maybe it was just shadows playing tricks, but in the fading light, his features looked wrong, blurred, like his nose and mouth were smudged out. None of us said anything for a few seconds. Then Drew, who was driving, just muttered "nope" and pressed the gas. We didn't even argue. We just wanted to get out of there. About 15 minutes later, Mikey, who was in the back seat, turned down the music and asked if we'd noticed something strange. He said he thought he saw the same guy standing off the road again just a few minutes ago. We all looked back, but of course the road behind us was empty. I laughed it off at first. Maybe it was just someone else wearing the same coat, but then Mikey added that this time the guy had his hand raised, not hitchhiking, but pointing directly at our car as we passed. By then, it was getting dark fast. The GPS kept glitching, showing our little blue dot drifting off the road into the desert, then snapping back onto the line. We figured we were out of cell tower range, so we just kept driving, hoping the road would eventually reconnect with the highway. That's when the car began to stutter. Drew cursed and tapped the gas, but the engine sputtered like we were running on fumes. According to the gauge, we still had a quarter tank. The lights flickered, and all at once the dashboard went black. We coasted for a few hundred feet before Drew managed to pull the car off onto the gravel shoulder. He tried the ignition, but it was dead. No lights, no sound, not even a click. It was as if the battery had been yanked out. We sat there in silence, surrounded by empty desert and darkness. No signal, no engine, just the wind scraping against the car. And then Mikey whispered something that sent a chill straight down my back. "He's out there," he said. "I saw him again, standing on the ridge." I turned, slowly, and there he was. A tiny silhouette against the purplish skyline, maybe 50 yards away, just standing completely still. Drew muttered something under his breath and locked all the doors. I fumbled for my phone, but it still had no signal. That's when we saw him move. Not walk exactly, more like a twitch, a sudden jolt forward, like someone skipping frames in a video. We all saw it. 1 second he was on the ridge, the next a few steps closer. And then again, each time he was closer than he should have been. Panic hit all three of us at once. Drew tried the ignition again, slamming the key in and yelling at it like that would help. Mikey was just staring, frozen in the back seat, muttering something over and over. I leaned out the window, scanning the horizon. Nothing now. The man was gone. The ridge was empty. I don't know what scared me more, seeing him or not seeing him. Then there was a knock. A slow, deliberate knock on the rear window. We all screamed. Drew turned so fast he hit his head on the steering wheel. Mikey dove to the floor. I turned around, heart in my throat, but there was nothing there. The window was empty. No figure, no shadow. But the knock was real, loud, solid. Drew was white as a sheet now. He got out of the car, swearing, pacing, trying to catch his breath. I yelled at him to get back in, but he ignored me, walking in circles, looking around like he expected to be attacked. That's when the headlights turned on, by themselves. We hadn't touched anything. The car was still dead, the keys were in Drew's hand, and yet the headlights flared to life, casting 2 perfect beams into the road ahead. And in those beams, maybe 20 feet in front of us, stood the man. Now we could see his face clearly, and I swear to you, it was blank. No eyes, no mouth, just skin stretched too tightly across a skull. He lifted his hand again and pointed directly at us. That was all it took. Drew didn't even get back in the car. He screamed something and took off running into the desert. Mikey and I sat frozen, watching as the figure slowly turned and walked out of the light. A moment later, the headlights died again. Complete darkness swallowed us. I don't remember how long we sat there. Could have been seconds, could have been hours. Eventually, the dashboard lights blinked back to life. The engine roared, the radio sputtered on mid-song, and the GPS rerouted itself like nothing had happened. But Drew never came back. We drove to the nearest town in silence, reported him missing. Spent 2 days with local authorities searching the area. Nothing. No tracks, no signs. They said he probably got lost and succumbed to the elements. But Mikey and I both knew that wasn't it. Because we hadn't told them the part about the faceless man. We didn't mention the knock or the headlights or what we saw in the beams. Who would believe us? It's been years and I still check my rearview mirror whenever I drive alone at night. I still avoid desert highways whenever I can. Because, I swear, sometimes when it's dark and I'm the only car on the road, I catch a glimpse of a man in a tan coat standing just beyond the shoulder. Waiting, watching.
I'm not exaggerating when I say this is the only story I've ever told that still makes my hand shake. I've been debating whether or not to share it for years, mainly because I've convinced myself that silence is the only reason I've been left alone. But every time I drive through New Mexico now, I get this sinking feeling in my gut, like something's still watching me. I think it's time to get this off my chest. This happened in late 2017. I was 26, driving from Las Vegas to Austin after visiting a few friends. I had taken a few days off work and wanted the trip to be peaceful, solo, and scenic. That's why I chose to drive through New Mexico. I wanted to see some of the desert landscape, maybe stop and take photos. I wasn't in a rush. On my third day of driving, I ended up taking a 2-lane highway off I-40 that looked more direct. Google Maps even recommended it. Huge mistake. The road was almost completely empty, just long stretches of cracked asphalt lined by red sand and scraggly brush. I passed maybe one car every hour. About an hour in, my low gas light came on. I wasn't panicking yet, but I definitely got nervous when I realized how far I was from any real town. Eventually, I saw a sign that said Gas Food Motel 15 miles, with an arrow pointing right. I took the turn. That detour led me to the most isolated, run-down gas station I've ever seen. It didn't look abandoned, but it looked wrong. Everything was too quiet, even for the desert. The lights above the pump were on, buzzing faintly in the daylight. A dusty sedan was parked to the side, and I figured someone else was inside. I parked, got out, and tried to pay at the pump. It didn't work. No screen, no buttons, just a slot for an old credit card reader that looked like it hadn't been used in a decade. I sighed and walked toward the station's entrance. The glass door creaked when I pulled it open, and a little bell above jingled. Inside, the air was cold, freezing even. The AC was blasting for no reason. It smelled like mildew and old carpet. The shelves were half-stocked with expired snacks and dusty cans. I stood there for a few seconds before I heard something behind the counter shift. That's when a man slowly stood up from behind it. He was tall and pale, probably in his 50s, with stringy hair and clothes that looked like they'd been slept in. His eyes were bloodshot, and he didn't say a word at first, just looked at me like he wasn't expecting anyone. Then, like flipping a switch, he smiled. "Pumps down, cash only. I can help you inside if you need." I told him I only had cards on me, then asked if the pump would work if I paid inside. He paused, too long, before saying no, it was out. The only option was to fill up using a rusty red jerry can he could loan me. He said I'd have to pay cash, and he'd pour the gas manually. Every instinct in my body told me something was off, but I didn't know what else to do. I figured I'd just buy a few gallons, get to the next town, and call it a day. I walked over to the counter and asked how much he charged. He leaned in closer than he needed to and said, $20 a gallon. I laughed, thinking he was joking. He wasn't. He just stared at me, waiting. I didn't want to argue, but I also didn't have enough cash. I pulled out my wallet and told him I only had $12. He shrugged and said I'd get half a gallon. That wouldn't get me anywhere. I was starting to sweat. I asked if there was an ATM nearby. He smiled again and said, "You can come out back. Might have something you can use." Every hair on my neck stood up. That phrase, "out back," sounded like a trap. I said no thanks and started backing toward the door. He didn't move, just kept smiling and staring until I stepped out and let the door close behind me. The second I got outside, I decided I'd try the pump again. Maybe I missed something. As I reached for the nozzle, I heard a soft sound behind me, a scuff against gravel. I turned and saw someone new, standing near the side of the building. It was a woman, or at least it looked like one. She wore a torn hoodie, and her hair covered most of her face. She wasn't moving, just standing still, facing me. I called out, asking if she needed something. No response. Then I realized something that made my blood turn to ice. She wasn't facing me.
She was facing the pump I had just used, like she'd been watching the interaction the whole time. I started to walk backwards toward my car, keys in hand. That's when the gas station door creaked open again. The man stepped out, holding something in his hand. I couldn't see what it was at first. Then the light hit it. A crowbar. I didn't think. I sprinted to my car, unlocked it, and threw myself in. I started the engine and reversed so fast I nearly hit the pump. When I looked back, the woman was gone. The man was still standing there, expressionless, watching me speed away. He didn't try to chase me, he just watched. I drove for nearly 30 minutes before I found another gas station, a real one. Lights, people, cameras. I filled up and parked, sitting in my car for a long time, trying to make sense of what happened. I eventually asked the cashier if they knew of a station about 30 miles west, near the highway turnoff. The guy looked confused. He said there hadn't been a working station out there in years. I described it in detail, the pumps, the bell. The guy, he shook his head. That place burned down a long time ago. Some drifter squatted in it. They found bones out back. Nobody goes out there now. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept checking my car, the rearview mirror, the locks. I left New Mexico the next morning and never looked back. But even now, I can't explain what happened. I saw them. I spoke to them. I felt the cold inside that store, smelled the rot, heard the man's voice clear as day. So I'm just going to say this for anyone passing through the Southwest. If you see an old flickering sign on a deserted highway promising gas and food, keep driving. Whatever's waiting out there doesn't want to help you. It wants to keep you.